Welcome to Lesson 7. Here we're going to tackle another sequencing game. Got a couple more of these, and then we'll jump into a grouping game and start doing grouping games. And at the end of this lesson, top 7 tips for writing a great personal statement. So let's jump into the game here. And in the upper right, you'll see this is game 1 from the October 2011 LSAT PrepTest 64. If you don't have a copy of that test yet, just take a look down here. CrushTheLSAT.org is a website. If you get on there, you'll see a link to the book you need to buy. And what do we have here? We have a sequencing game. We have 6 parking spots and 6 employees. RST VXY. So we have RST VXY. And I'm going to write Y in cursive. And the reason is that it's easy to imagine that when you start rushing through these problems, and of course you're under time conditions here, easy to imagine writing Y like this at some point and confusing it with an X. So to avoid that problem from ever coming up, be a good practice to, if it's the letter Y, to write it like that. So those are the items we're going to place. And this is a simple sequencing game. So we have spots 1 through 6, and I'll put my spaces down there. And now let's take a look at the rules. So rule 1, Y must be assigned to a higher numbered parking space than T. So we have Y. Now, what exactly does higher numbered mean? Does it mean 1 or does it mean 6, for example? What's the highest number, 1 or 6? For the purposes of the LSAT, it is 6. So important to keep in mind, it's 6. So we have Y to the right of T. All right. How about the second rule? X in a higher numbered space than S. So X is going to be to the right of S. And by the way, I'm going to write little dots by every letter we talk about in a rule. T, we now have Y, S, X, so that if there were a letter that wasn't discussed in any of the rules, that would be a floater. Rule 3, R assigned to a higher numbered space than Y. So that's rule 3. R to a higher numbered space than Y. Well, normally I would wait until the end to take that really crucial step of combining our rules. But here, just really easy to add it to rule 1. And why don't we sort of note that, all right, well, this is going to be rule 1 and 3 combined. And now let's take a look at rule 4. R must be assigned to slots 1, 2, 3, or 4. So R is in, how do we want to represent this? 1, 2, 3, or 4, which means it can't be in 5 or 6. Now, we've seen rules like that before. What would we do? We'd go on the top here and write R with a negative sign. R can't be in 5, R can't be in 6. Things that can't be true, I like to write on top of the diagram. Things that must be true, right in the diagram. Things that could be true, right underneath the diagram. Those are our rules. Now let's combine the rules, and you see what letter is mentioned twice? Well, R. If we were to combine those rules, what's the best way to represent the combination? Well, how about this? Spaces 1 through 4 are going to be occupied by this T, Y, R sequence. That's a really helpful way to represent it. Okay, that's T, Y, and R. What letters are left? Well, we have S and X. Going to go somewhere, and then V, our floater. We'll circle that and even note that V can move around. And then a big underline. That is our master sketch. Not going to tamper with that. What's the next step? Well, we want to see if we can draw any more deductions. If there's anything else we can say with certainty that we haven't already seen in the rules themselves. So let's just think about it. Anything we can say about T? Well, T could go in slots 1 or 2. Y could go in 2 or 3. R could go in 3 or 4. How about S and X? Well, S, looks like S could be in any of the slots from 1 through 5. How about X? Well, X, here's a helpful deduction. Can X go in slots 1, 2, 3, or 4? No, because 3 of those slots are filled by T, Y, and R. If X were in 4, there would be no place for S to go. X has to appear in slot 5 or 6. X has to appear in 5 or 6. And why don't I even erase this just to make it a little more clear? So S is going to come at some point before X. So you just think about it a little bit. If X were 6th, S could be in 5 or lower. But if X were in slot 5, S would have to be in one of the slots 1 through 4. V, still free to float around. So now, I mean, this is a big help that we've thought about all the things that could be true or can't be true or must be true. Make all the deductions, all the things that you can say with certainty. Think about that before you look at the questions. All right. Question 1, standard acceptable situation question. So what do? Take the first rule, see what we can eliminate, the second rule, etc. Now, first rule, we've actually combined rules 1 and 3, right? We need a TYR sequence. So we can expect to eliminate 2 answer choices, TYR. So what does that rule out? A is gone, B is okay, C is okay, but D is out. Why don't you pause for a moment, take a look at Rule 2, see what you can eliminate, Rule 4, see what you can eliminate, and then we'll come back and take a look. So Rule 2 gets rid of C, Rule 4 gets rid of B, answer choice E on this question. Question 2, we'll move to a new slide. If T is in a higher slot than S, which of the following could be true? Could be true, what does that mean? Well, that means that 4 of the choices can't be true, only one of them could be true. Or another way to put it, 4 of the choices must be false, and only one of them could be true. Okay, let's mark this as question 2, and we'll see how much we even have to write out here. T in a higher spot than S. So we take a look. Well, T, we already said, can only go in slots 1 or 2, so that's going to be what? S is in 1, then T, then Y, then R, then who's left over here? X and V. V is our floater, so we could have X or V. We could have X or V in slot number 6. Since this is a could be true question, I know my correct answer, it's going to involve either V or X. The placement of S, T, Y, and R, we know where those must go. Could be true question. Correct answer, it's going to have to involve X or V. So we take a look here. Answer B. V assigned to slot 5, that could be true. Okay, next question. Well, the first questions I like to do are ones that give me some details, give me some information. They tend to be a little bit easier to solve than more general questions. Not always, but oftentimes. And they give you a chance to get a real sense of what the rules look like and what the game looks like when you apply the rules. So next question, let's take on question 5. Switch slides again. Another could be true question. If Y is assigned to a higher number spot than S, which of the following could be true? So 4 of the choices are going to be statements that must be false, cannot be true, only one could be true. We'll take a look at the master diagram. Y assigned to a higher spot than S. Well, this looks a lot like the scenario in question 2, and we'll label this question 5. Very similar scenario here. If Y is in a higher slot than S, look at our master sketch. If Y is in a higher slot than S, then that means Y must be where? We said it could be in 2 or 3. It's going to have to be in 3. So Y goes in 3. Now, how about slots 1 and 2? Well, slot 1, it could be S or T. Slot 2, it could be S or T. As we said before, R is going to have to be 4th, and we're going to have XV, XV in slots 5 and 6. So the correct answer, it's going to have to involve either X and V or S and T. S and T seems more likely, but we'll take a look. How about statement 1? T in parking space 1? That is a could be true. Answer A. Question 6. R is in space 3. Well, if R is in space 3, not sure we even need to write this out. Clearly, spaces, just look at our master sketch. Spaces 1, 2, and 3 are going to be TYR. 4, 5, and 6 are going to be, well, S has to come before X. And maybe I'll write that out. This is question 6. So let's just look at the last 3 slots. 1, 2, 3. S comes before X, and we know that V can float around. And actually, we didn't even have to do that because this is a must be true question, right? So actually, the correct answer, it's going to involve T, Y, or R, the items whose placement we are certain of. Of course, the correct answer, it's not going to involve R. It's going to involve T or Y. So any answer choices that talk about T or Y? Answer B, T assigned to parking space 2. Well, that's false. Answer E, Y assigned to space 2. Yes. Correct answer is E. So this game, not too difficult at all so far. Questions 3 and 4, a little harder. So let's take a look at question 3. Of these 5 statements here, which of them would fully determine if which of the following is true? So let's take a look. Answer A, S assigned to space 1. If S is in space 1, does that completely determine, does that fully determine the entire sequence of the 6 people? Well, a couple of things. Just looking at question 2, where we had S, T, Y, then R. 5 and 6, well, 5 could have been X or V, and 6 would have been the other. So choice A does not tell you exactly what the arrangement's going to be. How about B? Y assigned to space 2. Well, in answer 6 down here, we have Y in space 2, and as we know, we couldn't fully determine who's going to go in slots 4, 5, and 6. But of course, we just have to look at the master diagram itself, right? If Y is in 2, we know where T goes. It goes in slot 1, but R could be in 3 or 4. S has freedom to move around. V still has complete freedom to move around. So B is out. How about C? V assigned to parking space 3. And V is our floater. So V has now gone from being an item that can go anywhere to an item that can only go in one spot. Let's do this. We'll look at the master diagram first. See what it looks like. If V were in slot 3, then what? Slot 1, T, then Y, then V in 3, R in 4. S has to come before X, so 5 and 6 going to be SX. Might be a good idea to write it out anyway, just to be absolutely certain. So they said V in 3. Look at the master sketch. Yeah, that means T is 1, Y is 2, R is 4, and then, yeah, S before X. So C. Correct answer is C. All right, last question, question 4. This one not so bad. How many of the employees can park in one of only 2 possible spaces? And here's question 4. I'll write it down. Well, what's the best way to handle this? Well, a couple ways we could do it. Can somebody appear in one of only 2 spaces? Well, we could write a little, how about a yes column and a no column, and then just list people under that. Or how about, I'll go down a little bit. How about I just write out each of the letters, R, S, T, V, X, Y. And if it's a person who's limited to one of 2 spots, I'll circle it. And if it's a person who can go in more than 1 or 2 slots, I'll cross it out. So let's see. When you look at the master sketch, TYR, I'm going to circle T, I'm going to circle Y, I'm going to circle R. We knew from the beginning, TYR, each of them can only go in one of 2 spots. And then when we put together the master diagram and asked, what deductions can we make? What are other things we can say with certainty? We already figured out that X can only go in one of 2 spots, 5 or 6. So X, we're going to add that to the list. So that's 4. How about S and V? V is a floater, so that's out. S can go in slots 1, any slot from 1 to 5. So S is out as well. 4 people are limited to one of only 2 slots. So answer D. If you found this lesson helpful, it would be fantastic if you can click the like button and share it with your friends. Would be great if you can subscribe to the channel. We're going to post more and more videos in the future. Next ones will be on logical reasoning questions. And before we jump to the top 7 list, if you have any comments about this game or games in general or the LSAT or frankly anything, feel free to leave the comments. We'd love to read them, and I'm sure other people would like to read them too. All right, so let's take a look at the top 7 list. Top 7 tips on writing a great personal statement. If you were to Google that subject, you would find a ton of web pages that give you very helpful information. But here are some tips that aren't necessarily mentioned everywhere. First one, what does a great personal statement look like? Well, it's a great idea to get yourself in the right mindset right away. And the way to do that, start off by reading. And we got 3 great links here that give you, and these are, the first link is from the University of Chicago Law School. The second one, BU Law, and the third one, statements on the University of Washington website. As you think about what your personal statement is going to be, instead of jumping right to all the websites that tell you the do's and don'ts of what to put in your statement and what not to put in your statement, start off by having a good sense of what a great statement does look like. Highly encourage you to take a look at some of the statements in those websites. And the Chicago Law website only has 4. Won't take long to read them at all. Tip number 2, and other websites will say something similar, but write a story, not an essay. And again, you'll see fantastic examples of this in the 3 links listed above. All of those essays, they are very personal. They describe in a very personal way what the applicant is like, who you are. That's what the admission committee wants to know, who you are. The third tip, a similar point, be memorable. What do I mean by that? Imagine you're an admissions officer at a law school and the school is getting, let's say, 8,000 applications. Imagine how boring it must be to read an essay that sounds like 500 other essays you've read in the last 2 weeks. Admissions officers get that all the time. To say that you want to become an attorney because your father was an attorney and his work has inspired you, imagine how many people say that. To say that you want to study constitutional law because you are a history major and you thought constitutional law was a great subject, imagine how many people are saying exactly the same thing. When you think about your essay, remember that whoever read it is going to meet in a committee at some point, talk about a ton of other applicants. What if your essay is the one essay that everyone remembers or that most of the people remember? Imagine how much that's going to help you. Now, in a previous lesson, I made a very general point that when committees make their decisions on who to admit, they place the most weight on LSAT scores, a huge amount of weight on GPA, and then everything else, whether it's essays, recommendations, all of that adds to anywhere from, let's say, 2 to 5%. That's a very general statement, but let's be a little more specific. Suppose that your LSAT score is exactly equal to the average LSAT score of, let's say, last year's admitted class, and your GPA is exactly equal to the average GPA of, let's say, last year's admitted class. Well then, what's your goal here when the admissions committee meets? Your goal is to break a tie. There are basically 500 other applicants, 1,000 other applicants, maybe 2,000 other applicants whose LSAT and GPAs are almost exactly equal to yours. Maybe a point higher, maybe a point lower. In fact, imagine if your LSAT score was 1 point below the average and your GPA was also 1 point below the average. Imagine how much your essay is going to help you. So that's another thing to really be aware of. And we're going to talk in a future video about law school admissions. But basically, if someone comes in with a great LSAT score and a great GPA, they're put in a certain pile of people who will be admitted unless their personal statement, resume, etc. were a major problem. And there's another pile of people who it is assumed will not be admitted unless they have a personal statement and a resume and recommendations that just stand above everybody else. But if you're in the middle, personal statement, very, very important. A few more points. I said it's very important to write a great personal statement, but what exactly is the law school asking you to write about? Make sure you read what exactly is the question. And here's a recommendation. In the very near future, choose, let's say, 3 law schools that interest you. Go to their website and you'll see a list here, a link here that gives you the links of the top 50 law schools. Some of them are links to a page that talks about personal statements. Some of them are to a page, just a general admissions page. A lot of times you'll have to go in there and sort of search around to find the page on personal statements. But a very good thing to do early on. Another thing to know is that some law schools require more than one statement. And obviously that's something you want to know about now, not 2 days before you submit your application. Point number 5. And not everybody agrees on this, so I'm going to circle the word maybe. But oftentimes you want to write a statement that is very specific to that school. And I've said before, you want to go to a school's website and do a little searching about what's unique about that school. What qualities do they have that other schools don't have? What offerings do they have that other schools don't necessarily have? If there's a natural blend between the personal statement you have in mind and some of those unique qualities, then absolutely point to those qualities in your essay. But a number of admissions officers will say that, no, the essay doesn't necessarily have to do that. So just something to keep an open mind about. Your approach to one school may be different from your approach to another school. Okay, point 6. And in the last session, we talked about this fantastic app called Trello. If you go ahead and read the personal statement requirements at all the law schools you're interested in, get on Trello, or even easier, you can send emails to Trello. And there's a video on how to do that. And just write down a sentence or two every day or every couple of days. And then when you get to the point where it's a few weeks before the application deadline and you're ready to write your final essay, you've got what turns out to be pages worth of great ideas. That can make the process of writing the essay easier. And so the idea here is you want to, in a sense, write the essay out over time. And then last point, and we will talk about admissions later, but if you apply before the admissions deadline, your chances of getting in actually do go up a little bit, and your chances of getting scholarship money actually go up a little bit. So some things to think about here. You want to start thinking about your essay very, very early, and I hope that all these tips help you do that. And if you have any comments on this subject, please post them. We'd love to read them. So in the next lesson, another sequencing game, a harder one, and then we'll soon get into grouping games. Hope to see you in the next lesson.